Hey there, and welcome back to another anatomy video. In this video, I'm just going to be doing the testing portion of the heart model. The actual lesson portion I did in a prior video, the link of which you can find in the description right below. So if you don't feel like you understand this well enough and you want that lesson, go ahead and click that video. It is about a half hour long, but I promise you everything in there is relevant for the exam. And I think you could definitely learn a lot if you feel unsure about this model. The way that the testing portion here is going to work, just as in all my other videos, you're going to go ahead and be able to, I'll throw the image up on the screen, you can pause the video at home, and then answer the question. I would recommend writing it out as well, because you will need to know how to spell this for the exam. And then hit play, and I will go ahead and throw the image, I'm sorry, I should say the answer up on the screen, so you can check that you not only have the answer right, but your spelling as well. Another quick tip for you, if you're not familiar with YouTube, as opposed to having to use your mouse to hit the pause and play button, if you actually just hit the space bar, that will pause the video, and then if you hit the space bar again, that will play the video. So just save you a little bit of time. But with that being said, let's go ahead and just jump right on into this. Okay, so to start off, go ahead and name what this area of the heart would be when the two atrium come together, as well as some of the vessels coming out. What area would this be? Okay, this area would be known as the base. And what would this area be where the two ventricles come together? Okay, that would be known as the apex. Next, let's talk about some of the vessels. What would this vessel be? Brings deoxygenated blood back from the upper body to the right atrium. Okay, that's going to be the superior vena cava, and although it's cut away here, what would the same counterpart be down here? It actually runs all the way down and through the diaphragm as well. Alright, that would be the inferior vena cava. And what would this vessel be called? It's carrying deoxygenated blood from coronary circulation back to the right atrium. It's the counterpart essentially to what the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava were for circulatory circulation. Okay, this is going to be the coronary sinus. Next, please name this chamber of the heart. Okay, that's going to be the right atrium. Name this valve right here. Okay, that's going to be the tricuspid valve. Name this chamber right here. That's going to be the right ventricle. Name these valves right here. Those are going to be the pulmonary semilunar valves. Name this vessel right here. This is going to be the pulmonary trunk. And then we can see part of it right here, as well as the other side right here. What would these two vessels be? Okay, those are going to be the pulmonary arteries. Okay, then the blood is going out to the lungs, right, to become oxygenated, and it comes back in. Again, I'm sorry, this photo is not the best. You can see a little bit of red right here, though. There's 4 of them, so there's 2 coming from this side and 2 also on this side as well. Right underneath the pulmonary arteries. What are those vessels called? Those are known as the pulmonary veins. Okay, and actually we can see 2 of them right here. Okay, these would be specifically the left pulmonary veins. Make sure for the exam that you know left and right, obviously, at all times. Name this chamber right here. That's going to be the left atrium. Name this valve right here. That's going to be the bicuspid or mitral valve. Okay, mitral valve is also what you might be tested on, so make sure you know both those terms. Name this chamber right here. This is the left ventricle. And we can see part of it right here. Name these valves right here leading into this vessel. Those are the aortic semilunar valves. Okay, now in terms of the aorta, please name this part of the aorta. Okay, this is going to be the ascending aorta, ascending because it's going up. Name this part of the aorta. That's going to be the arch of the aorta, or the aortic arch, same thing. And name this part of the aorta right here. That's going to be the descending aorta. Now again, I want you to remember that we have these three regions that we can see on this heart, okay, and that's all you're really going to be tested on for the lab portion. But for lecture, you'll also need to know that there are two other parts of the aorta. So let's talk about those real quick. If after we get past the descending aorta, the aorta exists right here, okay, in the thoracic region, let's say our diaphragm's down here, what would this part of the aorta be that exists in the thoracic region? I kind of gave you the answer. It's the thoracic aorta. Okay, and then once we get past the diaphragm and we're in this region down here, which I won't say which region that is because that'll give away the answer, what do we call the aorta? That's known as the abdominal aorta once we get down there. Okay, so just be familiar with those 5 divisions of the aorta. Directly coming off of the very beginning part of the ascending aorta, we have an artery here, and we have an artery here. What are these arteries called? Okay, these are known as the left and the right coronary artery. This would be the left coronary artery. This would be the right coronary artery. And when I throw this back up, you can see a little bit right here of the continuation of the right coronary artery. Okay, so it's running behind this atrium, and then it would come from that vessel that we saw coming out of the aorta. Okay, name these structures that are attached to either the tricuspid or the bicuspid or mitral valve, these structures that come off of them. Okay, these are known as the chordae tendineae. And name the muscles that attach to the chordae tendineae. Those are going to be papillary muscles. Again, if you can remember from the video lesson that I had, a good way to remember this is that your friends Pappy and Larry hold the chordae tendineae. Okay, and name the other muscle ridges that are found inside the ventricles that aren't the papillary muscles. I don't have the anterior interior portion of the heart, basically the part that came off of here, to show you right now, but you could also see them on the inside there as well. Okay, those are going to be known as trabeculae carneae. And name the muscle ridges, again, it would be on the portion of the heart that I've removed here on the inside of the atrium, those muscle ridges that we see on the inside of the atrium. Okay, those are going to be known as pectinate muscles. And name these ear-like projections that we see in the atrium. Those are going to be known as auricles, and they allow the atrium to fill up with more blood than if the atrium didn't contain them. And please name this structure right here as well as what it used to be in the fetus. This is known as the fossa ovalis. It used to be known as the foramen ovale when it was a complete hole that allowed blood to bypass the lungs by going directly from the right atrium into the left atrium of the fetus. And name this structure up here as well as what it used to be in the fetus. This is known as the ligamentum arteriosum. It used to be called the ductus arteriosus in the fetus, and again it allowed blood that was traveling up the pulmonary trunk and would have gone to the lungs in the fetus to bypass having to go to the lungs, and it was able to just be routed directly up into the aorta to go to systemic circulation. So I want you to also be familiar again with the fact that this is the coronary sinus, or the opening of the coronary sinus into the right atrium. We talked about the coronary sinus at the very beginning of this testing portion, but I want you to also be familiar that theoretically you could tag the coronary sinus right here. Okay, next let's go ahead and talk about the 3 layers to the heart. Can you name the very outer layer on the outside of the heart? It's a very, very thin line on the outside of this model. That's going to be known as the epicardium. Just deep to that we find this muscular layer. What would the muscular layer be called? That's going to be known as the myocardium. And inside that, lining the ventricles right here, we see this peach layer. And what would that peach layer be called? That's going to be known as the endocardium. Now, I did talk about it in the lesson portion, but I'll just break it down for you real quick again here. You won't be tested necessarily for lab portion, but this is relevant for lecture, so I'll go into it one more time. The heart sits in a sac known as the pericardium, and there's 3 layers to it. There's a parietal pericardium, pericardial cavity filled with pericardial fluid, a serous fluid, and then we also have the visceral pericardium as well. So the parietal pericardium is like an outer bag essentially that the heart sits in, and it would exist something like this if you could imagine drawing a bag around this. The space in between the parietal pericardium and the heart would be known as the pericardial cavity. And then when we talked before about the epicardium and the visceral pericardium are the same structure. So just to give you an idea of how the pericardium relates into the other layers of the heart, just wanted to kind of give you a heads up there again for lecture so you know what's going on. Okay, next let's go ahead and talk about the sulcuses of the heart. Sulcus, again, is just basically a groove on the heart. So we see a sulcus right here running between the atrium and the ventricles. And the atrium up here and the ventricles are down here. What would this sulcus be called? That sulcus is going to be known as the atrioventricular sulcus, and it also does continue on to the back as well, so just be familiar with that. It's also known as the coronary sulcus too. If you see that term, we're referring to the same sulcus. The atrioventricular sulcus and the coronary sulcus are the same thing. Name this sulcus right here. That sulcus is known as the anterior interventricular sulcus, and name this sulcus back here. This is going to be known as the posterior interventricular sulcus. Again, before I told you that the atrial ventricular sulcus or the coronary sulcus runs behind the heart, and we see that right here with some vessels inside of it. Before I move into the final part of this video where I'll be testing you on the coronary arteries and veins, let's go ahead real quick and talk about what's happening here off of the arch of the aorta. We have 3 vessels coming off that you can be tested on for the lab portion. We see right here the first branch off of the arch of the aorta. What would this vessel be called? That's going to be known as the brachiocephalic artery or the brachiocephalic trunk. Either of those is a fair term to be tested on. Name this vessel right here. This is going to be known as the left common carotid artery. And name this vessel right here. That's going to be known as the left subclavian artery. Again, you'll be able to see what I'm about to talk about here in just a second on the circulatory man, but also be familiar with this information for lecture portion as well. Know that this brachiocephalic artery or the brachiocephalic trunk, shortly after where it's cut off right here, if this were able to continue on, the brachiocephalic artery is going to bifurcate into the right subclavian as well as the right common carotid. So again, we get this mirror image of right subclavian, right common carotid, left common carotid, and then the left subclavian over here. So just be familiar with that and what's happening after that brachiocephalic artery bifurcates as well. Okay, and for the final portion of this testing video, let's go ahead and talk about the coronary or cardiac arteries and veins. So again, check with your professor and understand exactly what you need to know, because different professors will test differently on this. If you have a professor who just wants you to know the difference between a coronary artery and a coronary vein, or a cardiac artery and a cardiac vein, talk about the same thing here. Just know that the coronary arteries are red and the coronary veins are going to be blue. So if that's all you need to know, then just be familiar with that. If you need to know some of these specific ones, then I will be going into that right now and testing you on that. If you can please name this red artery right here, running down the anterior interventricular sulcus. That's going to be known as the anterior interventricular artery. There's many names for it. Again, this was also called the widowmaker. I don't think that's fair for the exam to put that down, but that's the layman's term for it. And name this artery right here. That is going to be known as the marginal artery. And please name this artery right here. This is the left side of the heart that we're looking at. That's going to be known as the circumflex artery. Moving on to the veins, please name this vein right here. That's going to be known as the great cardiac vein. Please name this vein right here. That's going to be known as the anterior cardiac vein. Please name this vein right here. That's going to be known as the small cardiac vein. And please name this vein right here. That's going to be known as the middle cardiac vein. Okay, so there you have it. That's the heart. Lots of information on it, lots of terms. I know if you still feel rusty, obviously you can watch the lesson as many times as you want. You can just watch this testing portion as much as you want, and keep testing yourself until you get it. Best of luck to you on your exam, and hopefully I will see you soon in another anatomy video.